Okay, we are going to be beginning the study of Masechet Yoma, the Mishnayot of Masechet Yoma. Today we are going to be learning, Bezrat Hashem, the first two Mishnayot of the first parak. Masechet Yoma, of course the word Yom refers to day, referring to the great day of Yom Kippur. So the entire Masechet pretty much is dealing with themes surrounding Yom Kippur, if not Yom Kippur itself. Much of it deals specifically with the avodah of the Kohen on Yom Kippur, what the Kohen would be doing in the Beit HaMikdash on the day of Yom Kippur itself. And the parakim that we're going to be studying are going to deal with various aspects of what the Kohen would actually be doing on Yom Kippur. In addition to just knowing this for the sake of understanding the Mishnah and understanding the role of the Kohen, it's also important to know this because in our tefillah on Yom Kippur, we describe in depth exactly what the Kohen would do. We go through the story of the avodah, and much of what we talk about during the long davening of Yom Kippur comes from these Mishnayot, comes from the act of the Kohen himself in the Beit HaMikdash. So let's begin with Masechet Yoma, Parak Aleph, Mishnah Aleph. The Mishnah reads as follows: Shivat Yamim, Kodem Yom HaKippurim, Mafrishin Kohen Gadol Mi Beito Lishkat Palhedrin. 7 days before Yom Kippur, so we're starting now, not Yom Kippur itself, 7 days before Yom Kippur would come, so immediately following Rosh Hashanah. Mafrishin Kohen Gadol Mi Beito. You separate the Kohen Gadol from his home. You take him out of his house, and you take him to the Lishkat Palhedrin. You take him to the official's chamber, to a special lishka, special chamber, special room that was situated on the outer side of the Beit HaMikdash, and that's where he would stay. Those would be his quarters. That's where he would sleep for that week. So that's the first thing that we would do before Yom Kippur even starts, and a full week before, 7 days, we would take the Kohen and we would separate him out from his house, and he would stay 24 hours a day, 7 days a week in this area of the Beit HaMikdash. The reasons for this are twofold. First of all, if we look in Parashat Shmini, we find when it comes to Aharon that when the Mishkan was set up, the Kohen Gadol would have to stay for 7 days. On the 8th day of Parashat Shmini, that's why it's called Shmini, the 8th day, that's when the Mishkan was set up. But for 7 days before that, he'd be separated out from everybody else, stay in the Mishkan, stay close by the Mishkan, and then he would be able to erect the Mishkan and start doing the avodah. So similarly, before Yom Kippur, which is the one day, the Kohen Gadol would go lifnim in front of Hashem in the Kodesh HaKadashim. So before that day, he would need 7 days of preparation in order to prepare himself to go into the Beit HaMikdash. Secondly, as we'll see soon, the Kohen had to be very careful not to become tamei. If he become tamei during this week, so then he would not be able to do the avodah in the Beit HaMikdash. And of course, we need him on Yom Kippur to be prepared, to be tahor, and to be ready to do all the various avodot that are part of what he does in the Beit HaMikdash. So for those reasons, again, the Mishnah starts Shivat Yamim Kodem Yom HaKippurim, 7 days before Yom Kippur comes. Mafrishin Kohen Gadol Mi Beito. You take him away from his house, Lishkat Palhedrin, to the official's chamber. That was the place where he would stay. The Gemara discusses that word, the Lishkat Palhedrin, that it refers to a place, the official's chamber, because, as we'll see later on, this becomes very significant. The role of the Kohen Gadol, while it was supposed to be something that was based on righteousness, based on holiness, based on how worthy an individual was to be the Kohen Gadol, to be the leader, the Kohen Gadol Me'achav, the one who's greater than all the other Kohanim, in the times of the second Beit HaMikdash, it became basically an appointment that was made by the kings who were in charge. They would appoint who they wanted to be the Kohen Gadol. So they called since it changed so often, it got the name of Lishkat Palhedrin, and the person was almost an official of the government, that he was an official serving the government in this role of Kohen Gadol. And as we'll see later on, it's very important to keep in mind who these Kohanim Gadolim were. Right? Were they like Aaron HaKohen, like the original ones, who were set aside because of their greatness to be the leaders and to be the spiritual leaders as the Kohen, versus, unfortunately, during later times, it was more a political appointment and the various ramifications that'll have on their avodah. But for now, we know 7 days before Yom Kippur, they set them aside in their special place. And in addition to setting them aside, taking them out of their house, the Mishnah continues, Umatkinim lo kohen acher tachtav, and you would prepare a second kohen, another kohen acher, another kohen, tachtav, literally underneath him, meaning in his place, as a substitute, to possibly a substitute for this first kohen. Now, why was this necessary? Why do you need a second kohen? So, the assumption here is, like we said, a kohen can't become tamei. If a kohen becomes tamei, he's not going to be able to do the avodah on Yom Kippur. So even though we set the kohen aside, and we have him already, but what if something happens? What if somehow he does become tamei? What if he's not able to be protected in the way he's supposed to be, and becomes tamei? Then we're going to be stuck, because Yom Kippur is going to come, and we're not going to have a kohen who is actually tahor and ready to do the avodah. So therefore, the Mishnah tells us you prepare a substitute kohen, a second kohen who can serve as a substitute, and he stands there on guard, and he knows he's the backup kohen just in case, as the Mishnah says here, Shema, perhaps ye'arabo pisul, he becomes disqualified. Something will happen that will make him disqualified, and he will not be able to. He'll be pasul from serving as the Kohen Gadol. Okay, so you have the Kohen Gadol set aside for 7 days, and we have a second Kohen who could be a possible potential Kohen Gadol, who would be able to take over if we should need him. Okay. Now, the Mishnah continues. Rabbi Yehuda says, he's going to add a little bit of an extra detail here in terms of how we prepare for this kohen. Af isha acheret matkinin lo. Not only do you prepare another kohen for him, just in case something should happen, this kohen should be pasul, but we even prepare another wife for this kohen, another woman to be his wife. Why? Why do we need that? So Rabbi Yehuda continues, Shema tamut ishto, perhaps tamut, like mate, his wife will die. Shema tamut ishto, and so what if his wife dies? I mean, his wife will die during that week before Yom Kippur starts. Shneimar says in the pasuk, v'chiper ba'ado uve'ad beito, that part of the role of the kohen on Yom Kippur, as the Mishnayot described later on, is the first step is he has to have kapara ba'ado for himself, uve'ad beito, and for his, literally beito is his house. So that's what the pasuk tells us. He has to get kapara, he has to get atonement on Yom Kippur for himself, in the first stage of the kapara, before he gets kapara for all the kohanim and all of Bnei Yisrael. He gets kapara for himself, uve'ad beito, and for his entire household. And the Mishnah says beito, when the pasuk says his house, of course, it doesn't seem that you would need to have kapara for a house. Houses don't sin, houses wouldn't need atonement. So what does it mean he needs atonement for his bayit? So beito zo ishto. Beito, this refers to his wife. Very often Chazal say that when you have a man, it refers to his bayit, so it refers to his wife being his foundation, the kind of a central force for him, and therefore beito refers to his wife, and therefore v'chiper ba'ado v'ad beito means he has to get kapara for himself and for his wife. Well, if he needs kapara for his wife, so then he obviously has to have a wife. And then we'd run into a problem if you have a Kohen Gadol who on Yom Kippur turns out not to have one. So therefore, Yehuda comes and says that just like we have to set aside a separate Kohen for this Kohen, perhaps he'll become pasul, like we said earlier, he'll become tamei, and he can't do everything he has to do to bring the korbanot, do everything he has to do in the Beit HaMikdash Yom Kippur. We're nervous something's going to happen to him and he's going to become tamei. Well, in order to do the avodah, he also needs a wife, and well, it's very nice that he has a wife right now. What if that something should happen to that wife between now and the time that Yom Kippur begins? So therefore, and if that would happen, he wouldn't have a wife. If he doesn't have a wife, he can't be the Kohen Gadol. He can't be the Kohen Gadol, so he got no one to do all the avodah in the Beit HaMikdash. So not only would you set aside another Kohen, but you'd even set aside another wife, that just in case something should happen to his wife, so then he would have someone else to be married to. So that's Rabbi Yehuda's opinion, that you also set aside another wife based on this pasuk, like that we saw that he has to have a wife. Amrulo, they said to him, the Chachamim responded to Rabbi Yehuda, Imkain, if that's true, Ein l'davar sof, then there is no end, right? Ein l'davar, this thing, sof does not have an end. Ein l'davar sof, right? This thing does not have an end. Meaning, if you really say that, well, maybe I'm afraid she's gonna die, the first one's gonna die, so maybe you should be afraid for even more things. Maybe afraid the second one's gonna die instead of third wife. Maybe the third wife will die to the fourth wife, and you have no idea of how. It's impossible to safeguard yourself in such a way that you're absolutely certain that there's going to be a wife available for this Kohen. It's just not possible to do that. So therefore, even though Rabbi Yehuda, it's a nice idea, right? He certainly needs a wife. We agree with you, he has to have a wife, and certainly better safe than sorry, set up another wife. But where do you draw a line? But if you once you're nervous about that and you're taking action in order to not prevent the possibility of his wife dying, but to protect yourself in a situation where the wife would die, so then in the davar sof, there's no end to how cautious you can be. Set up another wife. Set up every possibility to worry about. We can't possibly do that. So the machloket here seems to be that everyone agrees that it's worthwhile to consider the possibility that a Kohen will become tamei. And if he becomes tamei, you're going to need another Kohen, and no one argues in the first case we learned that you certainly will. That's certainly appropriate to set up another Kohen. But if you're dealing with a Kohen's wife, there's no problem with her being tame'ah necessarily in Yom Kippur. The problem is of her dying. So if we're what's called choshishin lemita, if we're afraid, if we suspect that someone's going to die, so then Rabbi Yehuda says you should suspect someone will die, and therefore you should suspect that the Kohen's wife will die here also, and therefore you have to set up another wife. And the Chachamim say, Ein l'davar sof. If you're afraid of that, then there's no end to that, right? You can never be too careful. It's impossible to really protect against that possibility, right? So it would seem that Rabbi Yehuda would say, all right, you're right. I can't set up 100 wives or an infinite number of wives certainly, to make sure 100% that there'll be someone. But one extra wife, that I can do. So I might as well be a little extra careful. And the Chacham seem to say that no, that's even the death of a person who's not ill, who seems to be healthy, who's of regular age. So just to say in the next 7 days they're going to die, that's so abnormal. There's no reason for me to have to protect myself against such a possibility. The halacha wouldn't demand me to do that. While the possibility of a Kohen becoming tamei, that's certainly within the normal realm of possibilities, and therefore that would be fine. So just to recap the first Mishnah, so we said that 7 days before Yom Kippur, you separate the Kohen Gadol, you put him in the Lishkat Palhedrin, in that special area in the Beit HaMikdash, and you set up another Kohen, because just in case he should become Tamei. And Rabbi Yehuda says, even another wife you set up for him, because he needs a wife, based on the Pasuk, V'chifer bado v'ad beito, and we're afraid maybe his wife will die. And the Chachamim responded, no, that Ein l'davar sof, you can't be so protective that you're even afraid his wife is going to die, and therefore you said he has one wife, that's fine, and you can set up a backup Kohen, but there's no reason to have an extra woman set aside. Perhaps his first wife would die, and he would have to go and marry a second woman. Okay, that's Mishnah Aleph.